My name is Michael Mitchell. Butavarian calls me Alexei. Never thought I'd be telling the story of how I fell in love with my best friend. David grew up together in a small town outside of Boston, where everyone knew everyone else's business, and secrets were hard to keep. I first met Will in 6th grade, when his family moved to our town from Chicago. He was the new kid tall for his age, with sandy blonde hair and bright blue eyes that seemed to catch every bit of light, while other kids were hesitant to approach the newcomer. I felt drawn to him. To light started simply enough. We sat together at lunch on his first day, bonding over a shared love of comic books and science fiction. Will had brought a Captain America lunchbox, and I remember thinking how brave that was. Most kids our age were trying to seem too cool for superheroes. You like Marvel? I asked Ed, pointing to his lunchbox. His face lit up with a smile that would become so familiar to me over the years. Yeah, do you? That was all it took. By the end of lunch we were deep in debate about whether Batman could beat Iron Man in a fight. From that day forward we were inseparable throughout middle school and into high school. Our friendship only grew stronger. We spent countless turns at each other's house playing video games, watching movies, or just talking for hours about everything done. Nothing. Will's family became my second family, and mine became his. It wasn't until our junior year of high school that things started to change. Or maybe I just started to notice what had been there. All along Will had grown into his height, filling out from years of swimming and track. He still had that same bright smile and those magnetic blue eyes. But no, they affected me differently. I first realized something was different during one of our regular movie nights. We were sprawled on my basement couch watching some forgettable action film. Will had fallen asleep, his head resting on Miss Holder. It wasn't unusual. We'd always been comfortable with physical contact, but this time I found myself hyper-aware of every point where our bodies shed. Warmth of his breath against my neck, the way his hair brushed my cheek. My heart was racing and I couldn't focus on the movie anymore. All I could think about was how right it felt to have him through, how much I wanted to turn my head just slightly, and I pushed the thought away, terrified of what it meant. Will was me best friend. I couldn't risk ruining that with these confusing feelings. Besides, I wasn't gay, was I? I dated girls before, nothing serious, but still yether. I was with my heart pounding because my male best friend had fallen asleep on my shoulder that night. Marquette, beginning of my internal struggle. I started noticing everything about Will in a new way. The way he ran his fingers through his hair when he was gone, concentrating how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed, the definition in his arms when he wore it shirts. Living with these new feelings while trying to maintain our normal friendship was like walking a tightrope. Every casual touch, every sleepover, every shared moment became both precious and torturous. I found myself making excuses to be physically close to him while simultaneously terrified that he would somehow sense the change in me. Only particular incident stands out in memory. It was during swim practice. We were both on the school team. Will was helping me perfect my butterfly stroke. His hands on my shoulders as he demonstrated the proper motion. You're too tense, he said, his fingers pressing into my muscles. Your movements need tobe fluid like this. His hands moved down me, arms guiding them through the motion. I was grateful for the cold water beckles. My entire body felt like it was on fire. His touch was purely but it sent electricity through my skin. I had to force myself to focus on his words rather than the feeling of his hands on me. Try it now, he encouraged, stepping back. I managed to complete the stroke, but my mind was elsewhere. After practice in the locker room, I had to wait until everyone else had left before I felt composed in auto shower and change. Well waited for me. He always did. You okay? Alex, you seem distracted today. Just tired, I lead, avoiding his concerned gaze. Didn't sleep well last night. He threw an arm round me shoulders as we walked to his car. Another casual touch that made my heart race, want to grab something to eat. Mom's working late and Dad's out of town. He should have said no. Being alone with him was getting harder, but I never called. Those blue eyes. Sure. Pizza. We ended up at our favorite pizza place, sharing a large pepperoni and talking about everything and nothing, just like who all we had. Will was telling me about his latest college research. He was thinking about applying to MIT. You should apply to Hesed, gesturing with a slice of pie. Grades are even better than mine in physics and math. We could be roommates. Thought of sharing a dorm room with Will made my stomach flip. Maybe I saddened and committed. I'm still looking at options. The truth was I'd already decided to apply to colleges on the West Coast. Part of me thought that maybe summer distance would help me get over these feelings, The idea of being away from Will hurt, but the fear of ruining our friendship hurt more. "Hey," Will's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Where'd you go just now?" I looked up to find him watching me with that intensity that always made me feel like he could see right through me. A piece of sauce was stuck to the corner of his mouth, and without thinking I reached across the table to wipe it away with my thumb. The moment I realized what I'd done, I froze. Will's eyes widened slightly, and for a second neither of us moved. Then he smiled, breaking the tension. "Thanks, Mom." Heatiest, but there was something in his voice I couldn't quite read. That night I lay awake in bed, replaying the moment of her, and over the way his lips had felt under my thumb, the look in his eyes, that slight catch in his voice was imagining things, seeing what I wanted to see as winter turned to spring of our senior year. Things between Will and me became increasingly complicated. There were moments when I could swear who was flirting with me, but then he'd mentioned going to prom with Sarah Matthews from our chemistry class, and he'd convinced myself I was reading too much into things. One Friday night in April changed everything. We were at a party at Jake Thompson's house, one of those typical high school parties where Simian's parents were out of town. Will had been drinking more than usual. His cheeks flushed, and his laugh a little lewder than normal. "Dance with me," Alex heckled out, grabbing my arm as some pop song played through the speakers. "You drank?" I laughed, trying to ignore how good his hand felt on my arm, so he pulled me closer, swaying to the music. "I'm on live a little." Maybe it was the couple of beers I'd had myself, or maybe I was just tired of fighting my feelings, but I let him pull me into the crowd. Often singers, we moved together, laughing and probably looking ridiculous, but I didn't care. Will's hands were on my hips, and the rest of the world seemed to fade away as the song ended. Our eyes met. Will's smile faded slightly, replaced by something more intense. For a moment I thought he was going to kiss me right there in front of everyone, but then Sarah appeared, wrapping her arms around Will's waist from behind. "Will, I've been looking for you everywhere." The spell was broken. He stepped back, mumbling something about getting another drink, and fled to the kitchen. I stayed there for a while, trying to get my breathing under control, when I heard footsteps behind me. Alex, it was Will. I turned to find him standing in the doorway, looking more sober than he had earlier. "You okay, Yowdy Sappered?" "Yeah, just needed some air." I forced a smile. "It's pretty crowded in there." He stepped closer, and I had the urge to back away. "Why do you do that? Do what? Run away from me?" His voice was soft, but his words hit me like a physical blow. "You've been doing it 4 months now. Every time we get close, you pull away." My heart was pounding so hard he was sure he could hear it. "I don't." "Yes, you do." He took another step forward, and this time I did back up, my lower back hitting the kitchen counter. "Why, Alex?" Maybe it was the alcohol giving me courage, or maybe I was just tired of pretending, because I can't do this no more. "Will, I can't pretend that I didn't do." I couldn't finish the sentence, but Will moved closer still, until we were barely inches apart. "That you don't wet, that I don't have feelings for you," I whispered, closing my eyes because I couldn't bear to see his reaction. "That I haven't been in love with you for months now, that watching I couldn't imagine my life without you in it." That's when I knew we had reached his car. Python, instead of getting in, Will leaned against it, pulling me close again. "Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you?" I countered. He laughed softly. "Fair point. I was scared of losing you, scared of what it meant about me, scared of what people would say. And now, he shit his thumb across my cheek. "Now I'm more scared of not being with you." This time when we kissed, there was no hesitation. Me hands found their way into his hair as his arms wrapped around me, holding Melik. He'd never let go. We only separated one. We needed air, and even then we stayed close, foreheads touching. "Come home with me," Will whispered. My parents are still out of town. The drive to his house was charged with anticipation. We held hands over the center console, stealing glances at each other at red lights. Neither of us spoke a muck. There was too much to say, and we had all night to say it once inside his house. Though nervousness crept in, this was Will's room, where we'd spent countless hours playing video games, doing homework, just hanging out. But now everything felt different. Will must have sensed my anxiety, because he pulled it into a gentle embrace. "We don't have to do anything," he murmured against my hair. "We can just talk or watch a movie." Or I silenced him with a kiss. "I want Tobe with you," I said softly. "I've wanted Tobe with you for so long." That night was a discovery of each other in ways widely dreamed about. Every touch, every kiss felt both familiar and entirely new. Took our time exploring, learning what made each other gasp and moan when we finally came together. It was with whispered declarations of love and promises for the future afterward. Lying in Will's arms, watching the moonlight play across his sleeping face, I felt complete in a way I never had before. But even in that perfect moment, Asmel's voice in the back of my mind wondered how long we could keep Thishiden and what would happen when people out. The next few weeks were like living in a dream. We kept our relationship secret, but being with Will in private made it worth all the pretending in public. We still did all things we used to do. Studientiger, hanging out after swim practice week, movie marathons, but now there were stolen kisses, intimate touches, and nights spent in each other's arms. Our families didn't suspect anything at first. After all, we'd been having slipovers for years, but Will's mother Claire was more perceptive than we gave her credit for. She caught us one evening. Late April, we were in Will's room supposedly studying finals. I was sitting at his desk while lay on his bed, but we kept getting distracted by each other. Will had just pulled me onto the bed for a kiss when his bedroom door opened. "Will, honey, do you boys want some?" Claire's voice trailed off as she took in the scene before her. We sprang apart. "But it was you." Late, the look on her face said she'd seen everything for a moment. "No beau de marved or spoke then." CLA quietly closeth door behind her. "Mom, wait," called out, jumping up to follow her. I sat frozen on his bed, my heart pounding. This was it. Everything was about to fall apart. I could hear muffled voices from downstairs, Will and his mother, talking after what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Will came back upstairs. "She wants to talk to both of you," said softly, holding out his hand. Tom. Claire was waiting in the kitchen, 3 mugs of tea on the table. Her face was composed, but her hands shook slightly as she gestured for us to sit. "Though long has this been going on?" she asked quietly. We reached for my hand, indefatigable since Jake's party officially, but we've had feelings for each other for a while. Claire nodded slowly. "And you're sure about this? Both of you?" Mum. Will's voice was steady. "I love him. I have for a long time. I love Will." To Mrs. Parker, I added, my voice barely above a whisper. More than anything, she was quiet for a long moment, looking between us. "Then Tummy, surprise." She smiled softly. "I always wondered if there might be something more between you two. The way you look at each other, it reminds me of how Will's father used to look at me when we were young." Relief flooded through me, but then she continued, her growing serious. "But boys, you need to be careful. This town Notavarian will understand, and Alex, your prince." She didn't need to finish that thought. My parents were conservative Christians who regularly expressed their disapproval of alternative lifestyles. The thought of them finding out terrified me. "We're being careful." Well, assured her we weren't planning to tell anyone yet. "Well, you can always be ourselves here," Claire said, reaching across the table to squeeze both our hands. "This is a safe space, but please be careful elsewhere." "And Will?" She fixed Herson with a stern look. "Door open when Alex is over." We both blushed at that, but nodded as we headed back upstairs, leaving the door open as instructed. I felt lighter knowing we had at least an ally in our corner that night. Aswell drove me home. We talked about the future. College applications were due soon, and suddenly the idea of applying to West Coast schools seemed ridiculous. "I still think we should both apply to MIT," Will said, squeezing my hand. Cliff got an apartment together after freshman year. The next few months were a delicate balance of keeping our secret while planning our future together. We both applied to along with several backup schools, but tried to keep our hopes in check. The idea of going to college together, of building a life together, seemed almost too good to be true. May brought promises in, and with it, new challenges. Varian expected us to bring dates. Will and I discussed going together, but weren't ready for that kind of attention. Instead, we made a plan to go with friends. As a group, I asked my friend Demma, who knew I was gay, though not about Will, and Will went with his lab partner, Rachel. The night of prom, we all met at Will's house for pictures. CLA helped coordinate everything, making sure Will and I got plenty of photos together under the guise of best friends. She even managed to get one of just the two of us standing close, our hands barely touching, bend our backs, a secret moment captured forever. At the prom itself, we had to watch each other dance with ornate steel glances across the room and maintain our careful distance spot. Later that night, after dropping their girls off, we drove to our spot, a loaded overlook above the town where we'd spent countless nights talking. Will had brought a small Bluetooth speaker in. As the stars twinkled above us, he pulled me into his arms. "May I have distance?" he asked softly, starting a slow song on his phone. "There Under the vast night sky, we finally got our prom dance. Held me close as we swayed to thou music, my head resting on his shoulder. It wasn't the traditional prom night most couples had, but it was perfect for us. Eager my MIT acceptance letter today, Will whispered into my hair. I pulled back to look at him, my heart racing. Why didn't you tell me earlier? He smiled. That brilliant smile I loved so much. He wanted to wait until this moment. Did you check your phone? I said, grinning. He pulled out his phone to find the email he'd forwarded him hours ago. My own might acceptance letter. His eyes lit up as he read it. Then he was lifting me off my feet, spinning me around as we both lowed. We did it, he exclaimed. We're re-going together. The celebration that followed was a blur of kisses and whispered promises about our future West Aid at the Overlook, until dawn, planning our life in Boston, talking about the apartment we'd get after freshman year, the life we'd build together. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. 2 weeks before graduation, my mother was using my laptop to print something for church when she found my emails to MIT emails that included details about Will and me planning to live at together. I came home from swim practice find both my parents waiting in Thelavine room, my laptop open on the comfortable one. Look at their faces told me everything had changed. Sit down, Alexander. My father said, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. My mother was crying silently, clutching her cross necklace. How could you do this to us? She whispered to God. That conversation with my parents was the hardest thing I'd ever faced. They alternated between anger, disappointment, and attempts to reason with me. They insisted it was just a feast, that I was confused, that Will had led me astray, was sending you to Pastor Michael's conversion therapy program. My father announced, and you'll be attending Liberty University in the fall. I've already called them to defer your mito acceptance. No, the word came out stronger than I expected. I'm 18, you can't make those decisions for me anymore. What followed was a blur of shouting and tears. My father threatened to cut off all financial support. My mother begged him to choose God over sin. When I refused to renounce my relationship with Will or give up my tea, my father gave me an ultimatum: conform to their wishes or leave. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and called Will. He answered on the first ring. Can you come get me? My voice broke. Please. 20 minutes later, his car up outside. I had hastily packed a bag with essentials, clothes, my laptop, important documents. As I walked out the door, my mother's sobs followed me, but my father didn't even look at me. Will was waiting beside his car, and the moment he saw my face, he knew. He pulled me into his arms right there in the street, not caring who might see. I broke down, then all the emotions I'd been holding back flooding out. Claire was waiting when we get to Will's house. You and look at us, and she immediately went into mother mode, making tea and calling guest room my room, as if it had been decided long ago that I would stay there that night after everyone else had gone to bed. Will snuck into my room. He held him as I cried, stroking my hair and promising everything would be okay. Weffel asleep like that, and for once Claire didn't say anything about closed doors. In the morning, the next few weeks were a whirlwind. CLA helped me set up a separate bank account and apply for aid. Will's father, Theodore, who traveled often for work but was fully supportive, and Claire told him about us, helped me navigate the legal aspects of declaring myself independent for college purposes. My parents made several attempts to contact me, mostly my mother begging me to come home underpant. Each message hurt, but with Will and his family's support, I stayed strong. Word got out about us, as it inevitably would. In a small town, some friends stopped talking to us, others surprised us with their swim team led by our captain Jake. The same Jake from the party made it clear that anyone who had a problem with this would have a problem with the whole team. Graduation was tense. My parents came but sat far from Will's family. They didn't stay for photos, but CLA made Soreto take enough pictures for both families, and when she hugged me after the ceremony, she whispered, I'm so proud of both my boys. That summer was both wonderful and challenging. Will and I no longer had to hide our relationship, but dealing with the town's reactions, the whispers, the stares, the occasional cruel comment was difficult. We found refuge at the Overlook at the lake, where we'd first realized our feelings, and in the safety of Will's home. August came faster than we. The day we left for MIT, Claire insisted on driving us to the airport herself. The car was packed with our belongings, everything we could fit in suitcases and boxes. The rest would be shipped later. As we stood at the security checkpoint, Claire hugged us both tightly, tears in her eyes. Take care of each other, she said, and call me often. Well, squeezed my hand as we watched her walk away. Ready? He asked softly. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure I was, but with Will beside me, I felt like I could face. Boston was different from our small town in every way possible. Fesity buzzed with energy and diversity. On our first walk through campus, we saw several same-sex couples holding hands openly. Nobody stared, nobody whispered. Will and I looked at each other and slowly, tentatively linked our fingers together. Freshman year, washerlinging. We were in different dorm shad, demanding course loads, and had to navigate being in a relationship, while making new friends and adjusting to college life. But we made it. Work studied together in the library, had newer dates in the dining hall, and spent weekends exploring the city. Our favorite spot became the Charles River Esplanade. We'd sit there for hours, watching the boats and talking about boats and nothing. It reminded us a little of our overlook back home, but that we could be openly affectious with. Fear by the end of freshman year age, had a solid group of friends who accepted us completely. My prom date had ended up at Boston University and became a regular part of our circle. Will was thriving in his computer science program while I discovered a passion for bioengineering. As planned, we got an apartment together for sophomore year at NI, one bedroom in Cambridge, that cost you much, but felt like heaven because it was ours. Claire helped us decorate via FaceTime, and Will's dad contributed some furniture. My parents, well, that was still complicated. My mother had started sending occasional texts, usually around holidays or my birthday. They would, but felt like tiny steps towards something. My father remained silent. But life went on. Will and I built our own kind of family, friends who became as close as siblings, professors who became mentors, Claire and David who supported us from afar. We had our struggles like any couple, but we faced them together during winter break of our sophomore year. We went back home for the first time since leaving for college. The town felt smaller somehow, but also less threatening. We were stronger now, more secure in ourselves and our relationship. On afternoon, while getting coffee at the local cafe, we ran into Sarah Matthews, Will's almost prom date. She was from UCLA and greeted us warmly. "Eloise knew you know," she said, smiling the way. You two looked at each other in chemistry class. It was pretty obvious Tonyan paying attention that encounter with Sarah made us realize how much we'd grown since leaving our hometown. What once seemed like insurmountable bustlack now felt like distant memories. We were no longer those scared teenagers hiding their feelings. We were younger adults, building a life together. Our junior year brought new challenges and opportunities. We landed a prestigious internship at a tech startup in Boston while I began research work in a biotech lab. Our schedules became more demanding, but we made sure to protect our time together. Sunday mornings became sacrilegist, US coffee and lazy conversations in bed. It was during one of these Sunday mornings that Will brought up the future again. We were curled up together, watching the winter sun paint Pattinson our bedroom wall. "Have you thought about after graduation?" he asked, running his fingers through my hair. I admitted. My lab professor mentioned a PhD program. I nodded. "She thinks I'd be a good candidate. What about you? Any aftos tech companies make an offer yet?" Will was quiet for a moment. "Google did bet. It's in California." My heart skipped a beat. "Oh, I turned it down," he said quickly. "There are plenty of opportunities here in Boston and I want to be where you are." I sat up to look at him. "Well, you can't turn down Google form." "I'm not turning it down for you," he said, pulling me back into his arms. "I'm choosing us. Besides Boston's tech scene booming, I've got other options." That conversation led to many others about a future. We started talking about marriage, not immediately, but someday. We rented a house in the suburbs. I dreamed of adopting kids. These weren't just fantasy conversations anymore. They were real possibilities. We could plan for during spring break of our junior year. UI got unexpected news. My sister Rachula was now in college herself, called to tell me our mother had been diagnosed with breast cancer. Despite everything that had happened, I felt my world tilt. "Do ya want to go home?" Will asked. When I told him, I nodded, tears in my eyes. Will you come with me? Of course. The drive back to her hometown felt different this time. Will held my hand over the center console, just like he had that first night after Jake's party. But now there was no need to let go. When we said a third cars at the hospital, my father was there. He looked older, more tired than he remembered when he saw us. He stiffened slightly, but then to my surprise nodded in acknowledgement. My mother was asleep when we first arrived. Rachel hugged us both, whispering, "Jim, glad you're here." When Mum woke up and saw me, she started crying. I moved toward her bedside and she grabbed my hand. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." That hospital reunion became a turning point in healing our family relations. Although my father still needed time to fully accept things, Mimitha's illness made us all realize how fleeting life is, and that family love matters more than anything else. During our subsequent treatment, I visited home frequently. Will was always by my side, his presence giving me immense supports. Even my father began to see Will's genuine love and care for me. Eventually, my mother beat cancer. During her recovery, we had many long talks. Shattered me that seeing how Will and I had stood by each other all these years made her understand that love shouldn't have boundaries. After college graduation, Webath stayed in Boston. I continued pursuing my PhD, while Will worked at a tech company. We bought a small house, finally having a place to call our own. Claire visited us often, and even my parents started making occasional visits. Looking back at that fateful party night, we're both grateful for that moment. That gave us the courage to take the first step. Life isn't always easy, but together can overcome any challenge. As Whitman says, some stories are destined for a happy ending from the start, and our story is the best proof of that.